welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Research Spotlight. This is the show where we get to interact with researchers across the globe. My name is Tisha, and today's conversation is with Dr. Jeffery Aryee. So, it was just recently when I Googled that I got to know that the NA is Niama. All these years I didn't know. Yeah. So Dr. Aryee is a lecturer at the Department of Physics, KNUST Ghana. He holds a PhD in meteorology and climate science from KNUST, and he is an interdisciplinary climate scientist with a research interest in climate data reconstruction, boundary layer meteorology, big terms, with emphasis on the evolution and inherent processes, climate variability and change, and climate impact studies. Jeff has published extensively in leading international peer-reviewed journals on meteorology and climate change issues, and he has served as a reviewer for many high-impact climate science journals. Jeffery serves as the satellite data scientist for the KNUST cohort of the GCRF. He will tell us what that is. GCRF African SWIFT. And the SWIFT is Science for Weather Information and Forecasting Techniques project. So it's so good to have you here and so good to see you after 9 years, right?
It's a great pleasure to be here too. Thanks for having me. I've always looked forward to being here. So
yeah, thank you. I know you are very busy. I mean, with what I just read, you are doing a lot of things, but then you've made time for this. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me too.
Yeah, so have you always been this passionate about climate science?
Well, let me say I've the passion of doing something related to the sky has always been there, even as a child. I mean, I remember growing up at that very young age, just looking up and going like, "Hey, come on, guy, we're gonna fly someday in the sky." I mean, trying to have this mindset of okay, and probably within that time too, because I was reading more of these astronomy books and then all that. So I had this kind of passion going to astronomy. I mean, be an astronaut and all that. And also maybe because my mindset of being an astronaut was a bit tweaked, I was thinking, okay, it's nice to be in an outer space, get to see the Earth from a different perspective. But yes, so as we moved on and there was the opportunity to pursue something that was related, which was going to physics. And then I then opted for that. And in the second year of my undergraduate study, there was the opportunity again to branch into a different branch of, to go into a different branch of physics, which is more meteorology and then climate science. And I felt it was, a great opportunity to do something still atmospheric related. And then I went in, and it's been a great journey so far. Very wonderful one. Quite interested.
Wow, great. I would like you to share a little bit about your childhood. But before that, how was taking that decision to move from physics to meteorology? How was it like? Because I remember we were in the same class. I mean, we were all doing physics first year, and then the meteor thing came. So some of us were like, I was like, should I go here? Should I go there? Because it was a very new area. You see, so we didn't know much about that. I think we only had one year group which were leading. We didn't have lots of past questions, and all that. We didn't know much about the program. So, I mean, how were you able to take this decision? Were you really were you cocksure that you wanted to do this, or it was like, okay, let me just go and give it a try?
Well, I would say it was one that was a bit informed by going to ask questions. So I remember a couple of friends of mine and then myself. So myself, Ralph, Felix, and a couple of other guys. We went to two of our faculty lecturers. That's Professor Prepo and then Professor Amekuji now. So they share the same office. We went there, and then Professor Amekuji then had just come to the country, and he was also a lecturer for the program. So we went in there, asked questions. I mean, what are the prospects of going into meteorology, and then what are the benefits one stands to gain? Where will the person likely be involved in? And yes, so we gained a lot of information from them. I remember they opening up and telling us a lot. And then, even though
That
we
was
had
a
one,
smart move anyway,
oh
that was
yeah,
really a smart move, yeah.
sure, sure. And well, when I got there, I wasn't the one asking all the questions because I was just there to, do my
Listen.
listening and then get my points. But the friends I was with, I mean, the ones I were with, sorry, I was with, yeah, they were the ones who were asking all the questions. I mean, I remember Felix doing all the financial questioning, asking, okay, I mean, what do you stand to gain when you go
Mhm.
into that? And, Ralph and then the other guys also asking what the course itself entails. And yeah, they did a great work by sort of demystifying all the hard components that we probably didn't get because we weren't in the field and made us understand. And after that, I still went to, ask some colleagues, I mean, some seniors who are ahead of us, I mean, just by a year. So I remember Caleb and I think Victoria, yes, and finding out how they found the course and what they were doing. And, from the interaction with them, we found out, okay, it was kind of interesting. Also, within that time, they had been part of the Nimde Summer School. So they had also interacted with a lot of foreign scientists and people who were doing meteorology. So, sharing all those interesting moments with us really got us thinking. And then we took the decision. It wasn't an easy one, though, but it
Yeah.
was worth it. Yeah.
Wow. And after all these years, do you feel fulfilled doing what you're doing?
More than fulfilled. I couldn't have chosen right. I probably maybe from the early phases, I was wondering, was this really the right step? Okay, and also because you were seeing things that were sort of new to you, and so it got me thinking at a point. But then with time, I realized if you wanted to go further, if you wanted to really love it, it demanded more, wide scope research. I mean, asking questions as always as you do, and then also developing a passion or a niche within that particular area. So, and I also sort of loved, the whole component of trying to do programming or scientific computing and applying it to something. So that gave me the chance also to really enjoy the program itself. And it's something I've used all over the years. So I look back and then I'm like, okay, it was worth it. I mean,
Mm,
through Met, I mean, we are here now. We couldn't
yeah.
be less grateful.
Yeah. When I was doing the introduction, I forgot to mention that you've also founded like you have a channel on YouTube where you share a lot of good stuff. Like I have started following you to refresh and to learn more about Python. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that, what it is about, what you do there?
Okay, so the channel is actually called Meteor Data. That's it purely has, well, the connotation of Meteor Data was purely because of how it was founded. The initial phases of it was to sort of respond to questions that people had in meteorology. So I remember I was then a couple of students asked me, some questions, and I felt okay, rather than answering them one after the other, it would be best to, put something out there and they could then find it beneficial, and then it could also help other people who are outside who probably have the same challenge. And so, in responding to that, I then put up the channel, and sort of it became beneficial to them. But I
And
remember
not only
after,
your students, right? Because a lot of people
oh
are
yeah,
really watching it and it's really good.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It
So I
helps.
mean, after doing 2 or 3 series of responding to meteorology questions, I just asked myself, I mean, this feels a bit, you know, discipline specific.
Yeah.
What of doing something, you still have a skill that cuts across, something that people
Mm-hmm.
can use all over, and people have these same. I mean, you go for conferences and people, have these challenges and all that, and it always has to do with programming or trying to find something that they can use for their data analysis, for their work. I mean, for processing and interpretation and all that. So then the idea came to still use that same channel and get to do something more into Python programming.
Mm.
And so with the same name, Metadata, sort of change the niche into programming. And, it's been good,
Yeah.
impacting people all over.
Yeah. I've watched a couple of your videos and I'm like, wow, this is really good. Yeah, so viewers, the name of the name of the channel is Python programming, right?
No, it's Meteo Data.
Meteo data, okay, okay.
Yes.
But there are lots of Python programming there. So
Yes.
from the
Exactly.
basics, right? So if
Exactly.
you want to learn, you want to refresh, you can visit the channel on YouTube and then watch. You will learn a lot. Okay. So as a researcher in climate science, what problems are your research work solving?
Okay, so I'll say I'm more interdisciplinary in the sense that I do various aspects of not just, when you say climate science, it's a bit one-sided, not purely only climate science, but also go into a bigger branch of atmospheric science. So boundary layer meteorology is purely, it has climate components, but it also has purely atmospheric science, or let's say meteorology components. And this is how I try to sound less technical as possible. All right. So
Yes. We don't
yes.
want the big terms.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had series of encounters where people ask, okay, so tell me what you've been doing. And I
Mhm.
start and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm confused. So
Talk to our level.
yes, exactly. So when we say boundary layer, we are just referring to, from the surface of the earth all the way to about 1.5 kilometers, all right, above the earth. And this is where we find ourselves. I mean, this is where we are having this interview now. And so it's sort of impacting on us. We also have a feedback on it. So it's a crossway sort of dependency, right? The boundary layer depends on our lifestyle and all, and then it also impacts us. Now, if you probably have, yes, I mean, you have traveled, so it's quite easy to relate. I mean, when you take off from, sorry, when you take off from Kotoka International Airport, for instance,
Mm.
and while you are moving from the airport, you realize you are in a very dense, sort of dusty area. And then right after you go above a certain level, okay, you would notice that it gets clearer and it looks dusty from beneath. Now, within this dusty region, it forms a component or a part of the boundary layer. And this where my research was more focused within. Now, in this, I try to look at the dynamics of the process. I mean, how it varies on a day-to-day basis. What are the determining factors that influence its drive? And also to the point that this region has, particularly in the summer time, that's in our part, you say the rainy season, okay, the peak of the rainy season, it has the presence of these low clouds, so clouds that are within this particular region, and they sort of are stagnant over the, or let's say stationary over the ocean environment, okay, during the daytime, and then towards the evenings they start moving onto the land. So if you've lived at the coast of Ghana, for instance, you would notice that at nighttime you have higher movement, or let's say the flow of these clouds onto the land. Now these clouds move a bit further into the inland, and then they have a net effect on the climate of the area. It also impacts on, mixing processes within the boundary layer. It interferes with radiation, that's solar radiation, and a couple of other components. And so what I did was to see what drives these low, I nearly said LLCs, I mean, what drives these low level clouds and leads to their formation, then how they also generally impact on the other components like the solar components, and then net radiation flux and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And what are some of the challenges that you face in this path?
Oh, okay. Sure. So is this it's a challenge that's always the same throughout almost every aspect of atmospheric science, particularly of our region. One is the fact that there is insufficient in situ data, I mean raw data from the ground. Okay, so most of the data sets you would want to use are either satellite based or let's say remote sensed. And these satellite data, for instance, if I want to get information from the ground, okay, and these satellites are positioned way high, at particular times of the day, they are unable to retrieve information. For instance, if I'm using an infrared channel at nighttime, it sort of is unable to distinguish the background, which is the ground, from the features that are above the ground. And so there's a bit of noise in the data. So you'd rather want to use something that's from the ground, which is raw data. Okay. But this is where we find ourselves, where we do not, engage in some of these experimental activities regularly. Well, there could be various reasons, capital wise. I mean, the zeal, low, the fact that there's, let's say, a limited number of skilled personnel to do that and all. And so that serves as a challenge. Now, what I did in my study was, well, it was still a part of the DASIWA funding. That's an EU funded project. And this was led by Peter Knippet and a couple of other guys in Germany, that's KIT. And so what we did within that period was to engage in a field campaign. There was an extensive field campaign. And so we had different partners on board the project, partners from Germany, from France, from UK, and a couple of other places, and lots of African partners too, from Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, and so on. And we had various super sites. Kumasi was one of them. And so what we did was to set up these instrumentation, this extensive instrumentation, and do real-time monitoring of these features in real time and then analyze them. And so, yes, so that becomes one of the challenge. After the project is done, they will definitely take their equipment back. And so if you want to do it on the long term, then it means
it becomes a problem.
Exactly.
Well, but is there something that the government can do to help you in this?
Oh yes, I believe even as this, we can actually adopt what the Europeans do, or what the let's say the foreign nationals do. So I would use that as an example. I mean, there were things that not every institution had, but then because of the collaboration, it was easy to put resources together and then get to move them and get to do such work. So let's say if there are institutions, or governments can come in, but even from an institutional perspective, if institutions have various, let's say, resources, we could have collaborations. And by collaborating, we put our equipment or our resources together and use them to effectively undertake this work. And it's quite unfortunate that some of these collaborations aren't there yet, but it's better than before. I mean, it's way better than before. Now people are going to more, collaborative work, so it's kind of effective. And then also from the government part is to, invest more into research, make research a priority. I mean, we're always talking from perspectives of data. I remember when the COVID came and, always we present, okay, our data says this, our data says that, and then you wonder, okay, so where's the data coming from? And because you expect that there will be a huge pump into research. Okay, so just as we do when there's a pandemic or any other thing, we don't need to wait for it. We need to undertake this effective research. So fund the researchers, all right? Let them have what is needed to undertake this research. And if possible, you can also set up, let's say a fund that researchers can actually submit proposals and then sort of win a bid to undertake this work. And by so doing, they then target their works to real-time problems that people, let's say the institutions or the nations have, and they get to address them. I don't know if you get it. So that's pretty much what should be the way forward. The collaboration component is one, and then the funding from the government becomes a top up to it.
We hope that the policymakers get to see this and do something about it for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So you're also serving as the satellite data scientist for the KNUST cohort of GCRF. What is that?
Yeah, so GCRF is a bigger body. I mean, it's the Global Challenges Research Fund. Okay, it's purely a UK research fund. And so Africa Swift is funded by the GCRF. Okay, so the African Swift is also a current project that is being run. And this is led by partners from University of Leeds, that's the UK, and they've got also extra partners on board, foreign, and then also a predominant part of it is African scientists. So majority are from West and East Africa, and what we are doing within the project is to improve the reliability of these forecasts that are being issued on a short to long-term basis and see what enhancements can be done to making them more representative of our region. And aside that, as part of the project, we rather adopting more co-production approach where this time it's not as though the scientist sits in isolation and then gets to do his work and then comes to tell the end user, okay, this is what we are finding. But rather we want to engage the end user or the stakeholders right from the beginning. That's purely co-production. And so as well as part of it, we are encouraging also citizen science and all. And that's purely what African Swift is about, trying to advance weather forecasting and then how to disseminate or communicate it to the end user and to be sure that we are getting the right output from whatever model or whatever approach was used to issue the forecast.
Wow. What is a typical day like for you? I mean, doing research, lecturing, being the lead of this satellite thing you just talked about, and then other things.
Sure.
How is a typical day like for you?
Well, a typical day for me would start with, let's say, waking up from bed. I've been doing my quiet time and then probably where it's necessary, in most cases, to work out, go prepare, and yes, maybe set off for work. But prior to that, once you wake up, also spend some time to read articles and, research works that are in my field. And beyond that, maybe I'd say get into the office. That's where I have my satellite. So get into the office, be sure the satellite is working. And then beyond that, it's all about purely research, engaging in research, seeing where to collaborate, who to collaborate with. And I spend my evenings doing other activities. So it's not purely research all throughout.
I know you do music, you mental artists and all that.
Exactly. So those actually take my evenings and then a part of my weekends. And also within the evenings and then the weekends, mostly I'll say at dawn time. Yeah, when it's dawn, that's when I get to do the video records for Meteo Data, because by then it's quite serene and it's easy to reflect and see exactly what would address people's needs. Yeah, so that's purely a typical day for me.
Wow. We all have 24 hours, but some are using theirs better than others. And you are really using yours properly. Yeah.
We're trying. We're trying.
Yeah, keep up with the great work you are doing. Sure. You have published extensively in leading international peer-reviewed journals in your field, and then you have also served as a reviewer also. So can you tell us a little bit about what goes on in writing a scientific paper?
Okay, so writing scientific paper, I'll start with that. People have this notion, once I write, I publish, that's it. Well, that's where we as scientists a bit, I would say, failing a bit, because after publishing, after getting it out, you still need to push for the work. Whatever you've done, make sure it's being used. If it's a product, make sure it's being used. All right. So I'll come to that aspect, but let's go back to the publication phase. Now, people also have a notion that once I submit it, I expect that it goes through, easily. It's just rocket science, but it's not that. It's not as easy as people think it is. It's also not as frustrating as people exaggerate it to be. It's a blend of the two. Trying to understand what to do. So there's the initial phase of, identifying, or let's say engaging the research first. Once you're done with it, you have a result, you've written them together into an article. Now identifying which journal your research or your manuscript fits into. It's better to go to their URL or their webpage, read through the description of their journal and be sure that, okay, this manuscript fits into the journal you want to publish into, or that particular journal. And once that is done, you would have to submit. And after submission, it goes mostly to the editor first. The editor would then read through. And in most cases, if an editor finds a work not fitting in, would recommend an alternative for you. And yes, beyond that, there's the phase of it getting to a reviewer, and that's the waiting period. So, depending on the journal, some reviewers, are fast, others will take some time. But then, lo and behold, you still get your reviewer comments, and if they are, if it passes through on the first go, which rarely does, then you're good to go. If not, you have some minor corrections to do, some explanations also to give, or some responses to give to the reviewer comments. If not, and it's a major change, it's not as bad as you might think it is. It deals with, going back to identify, maybe based on their expertise, they want to have some clarifications. I remember I was publishing my master's work, my master's research, which was on climate data reconstruction, and I had reconstructed this data. And I remember I got a comment from a reviewer that said, okay, I did a comparison somewhere, and it seems my results were not so right. Then initially I was a bit hurt because, well, he used a term that was way harsher than what I'm saying. He was like, this is dubious. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, come on, at least say it in a nicer tone. But later I took the data, tried to check through, and I realized there was a problem with my code. I did a reverse comparison. So instead of, let's say, comparing the north to the north and the south to the south, by trying to interpolate the data or sort of grade the data, I reversed them. Okay, so it was rather giving me a central, high value, and then all the ends, because they were reversed, were very low.
Yeah.
And so after taking time based on his comments, going back to see it, I'm like, oh wow, it was even a learning step. So I
Yeah.
got something from it.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is the other aspect. So once you take your, whether major review or major revision, you take that, you get to do it, and you are intact, you're okay with it. You submit your reviewer comments, and then hopefully you get your work published. And like I said, it shouldn't end on the shelf. So if it's, for instance, a product, if it's something that would impact, then it means it has to go all the way down to who it's going to impact. You need to make sure you communicate it. That's where the role of communication comes in. And I mean, this can be done through stakeholder engagement, through policy write-ups, presentations at conferences, and then also other engagements. And also finding, I would say, the right partners to make sure the work is beneficial. So for instance, the climate reconstructed data I had, it was purely data from GMET. And so then it had to go in a way back to, their research unit also to make good use of it. And there are still some collaborations, we still have in trying to see how best to improve, the whole, data span, and then also the variables that we used. So purely that's what research entails, and then publishing entails. And me also serving as a reviewer. Yes, also serving as a reviewer. It's a lot of work, I would say. But it's interesting to also read people's work. That way you get, new ideas, you get to see what people are doing. It keeps you more current. Research has shown that you can't say you are a professional at something if probably in the last 1 year you've not read anything on that subject. You can be a pro at it. So then there's a need then to also, make sure you are current. And serving as a reviewer is one of the great opportunities you can have to be current in your field. And it's not as though you appoint yourself, but then most of these journals you get to publish in, will also, maybe after receiving some articles, will write to you and find out if you're interested to review a manuscript. If it's within your scope, I'd advise you to take it and review.
Review it.
That way you get to contribute to somebody's work, and you also help to make the community better. And it even helps you. But if it's not within your field, you don't need to, take it and do a study work. Exactly.
Yeah, talking about if it's within your field or if it's not within your field, when you are writing these articles, do you put some of us into consideration? Like, for example, if I pick a paper that Jeffrey has written, can I understand it, or I have to be in your field before I can understand what's in the paper?
All right, so there are what we call technical papers, and then also in a bit of a way, I would say other papers that will be quite non-technical. If it's a technical paper, then I mean, you will try to use technical terminologies, all right? But then, even with that, most manuscripts or most journals will advise you to have highlights of your work. And so in the highlights, you try to indicate, let's say, the very brief, more non-technical, aspects of the work so that people understand. And also some manuscripts also would have you write an abstract and then write either a technical or non-technical abstract. Okay, so you write something that would suit your community and one that would be easily understandable by everyone. And aside that, one thing that, at least working with my supervisor then, has really taught me is that when you undertake your research, by giving a recommendation, you don't just give recommendation for future work, but you should even give recommendations for policy brief. You need to, and by giving a recommendation, you then state what your findings were and then what recommendations you are given. And that's one way to engage people.
Wow, that's interesting. Solomon Jima, we have a comment from Solomon Jima, and he says, "God bless you for educating us and also sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Keep
that's great.
it up. Very interesting." Yeah. So, Dr. Aryee, do you have a mentor or someone you look up to?
Oh, yes, I would say a couple of them, some close, some distant. Yes, so um, one very key mentor is my supervisor, that's Professor Leonard Amekuji. He's currently the provost for the College of Science. So we've worked
Oh,
extensively. I really admire his work ethic in the sense that, he's a go-getter. He doesn't stop at anything. He makes sure he gets whatever he's, centered on. And a couple of others, I mean, some quite distant. One person I always I always enjoy his work ethic is Adrian Tompkins. I haven't worked with him yet, but I always admire him. I mean, you hear a lot about the guy, I mean, and he's actively all over the space. Aside doing research, he's also, you go onto Stack Overflow, for instance, and he's responding to things that you would think is out of his scope. And the guy is still doing great. And a couple of other, scientists from over here, I would say, within the sub-region and also outside. People are doing great stuff. And yes, I would say subconsciously being mentored by them, by their work ethics and
yeah,
all.
work.
Sure.
Great. Are you satisfied with the current state of research work in Ghana?
That's like asking, let's say, somebody who needs more. Okay, or it's like asking Oliver Twist, are you satisfied? I mean, it can never be. It's it's this, but it's always important that we celebrate the little steps we've made, the strides we've made. It's very important that we celebrate it. Can it be way better? Exactly, it can be always better. I mean, there's this a candidate, you say, epocransio to boom, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So you would always want to go a step further. Now the scope of research is going beyond, and people are actually doing things in different dimensions. So we also can equally do same and even go beyond. And so it's not bad from where we've come from, but we can still move the frontiers of research further and make them more engaging. I mean, it should get to a point where um, when we talk research, people wouldn't go like, "Hey, nah, what are they doing?" Sorry for using the chi, right? Because of
I get it. Don't worry.
it,
Feel
it
free.
virtually means what are these people up to? Okay, that's typically what when the scientist comes to present his work, those who do not have an understanding of it will get to say that, I mean, we do not understand this. But I should get to a point where when we talk research, the ordinary African, in fact, the lay person even has a better grasp of it and a better grasp of it and has an understanding of what you are saying, right? And be able to not just understanding, but to be able to make meaning out of it and make sure he or she understands how to use it effectively for his or her own benefits. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But talking about making it better, whose role is it? Is it the researchers? Is it the institutions? Is it the government?
I would say it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid in the sense that it doesn't take one person. I mean, the benefits of research wouldn't be of impact to only the researcher. It becomes beneficial to everybody. Now, there is a role, there's a mandate that the researcher has to play, or a mandate that he has to take, something that he has to do. there's a part of the government that needs to be done. Now, the researcher must ensure that he or she is undertaking effective research, something that is problem based, all right, and finds solution to problems. Other than that, then it's just a replication of somebody's idea if it doesn't address a problem. And then the duty of the government is to make sure you have the available resources. You support the scientists with the necessary resources to be able to undertake this work. For instance, if um, for a scientist to get his work, or a work sort of in a journal, it's now that we have open access, some open source journals that are giving you the chance to, publish, and then they bear the cost and then all that. But if you are publishing in a high impact journal and you are paying, in huge sums, right? And you know the equivalence of those sums when you compare to the various currencies in some parts of Africa. And the person has to, fund this research with personal money, then it means it becomes a limitation to what the level of research the person can undertake. But if our nations are taking, hold of these funding opportunities, like I said, establishing a fund that sponsors or sort of supports the work of people, of scientists, that would go a long way to, make sure scientists also get to deliver, their works are recognized. And if possible, there's the need to also set up these platforms like what you're doing right now. It shouldn't be just an individual thing. I think it's something that should go way beyond. It should even go beyond just institutions. It should cut across, and it shouldn't be limited to individual states, but it should be sort of linked up, and that would allow for effective communicating these research works. Once that is done, then it means we are bridging the gap between one funding of this research, two undertaking the research itself, and then finally also communicating this research and making sure that it has an impact, right? Other than that, we keep working in isolation. Yeah.
Wow. Great. It's been a wonderful afternoon having you here, share with me all this great stuff you are doing. I must say you are doing so well. Keep it up with all
Thank
the
you.
things you do. Keep the Python stuff coming. And yeah, we are here. We're going to learn a lot from this. So what would be your advice to your younger self?
Yeah, wow. Oh, that's a lot. I didn't see this coming. Right, but that's great. It's something I would always say to, if I had the chance to advise myself, right, I'll definitely tell myself to, pursue what makes you happy, right? And in pursuance to that, you make sure um, you're impacting the lives of people, and that's the core of your mandate. Making sure that whatever you are doing, be it research, out of research, whatever engagement, whatever activity, is impacting on somebody's life. Other than that, then
It's not
there's no
worth
purpose
it.
in living. Yeah, sure.
Wow.
So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any final words? Final words.
Oh wow.
Again, we
So,
know we know that you are loaded with stuff, so we want to tap into all of them. That's why, yeah, I keep going back and forth. So final words.
right. So my final words would be to anybody who is listening, as that or who is watching. In fact, like I said, identify a niche, find something that you think you can do and be good at it. Whatever it is, whatever skill it is, find something you can really develop, and find people who would mentor you to develop that. It's not easy. And the problem people have is when they think of mentoring or mentorship, they think, okay, this person has to always approve of my work. And that isn't it. That's just like being a robot. Okay, you make the mentor a robot.
Yeah.
But then once you are subjecting yourself to being mentored, it means you are subjecting yourself also to being criticized. You're giving the mentor the mandate to criticize your work in a positive way, though. And then it's up to you to also identify the potential within the comment or the criticism and using that effectively. And so I would advise people to go all out, find a niche, find people who would mentor you on that path, and try to, work as a team, try to collaborate with people. That way you get better at what you're doing. You do not work all alone. You get to share ideas, get people query you, and then you become better. And that's pretty much how to be, great at what you're doing. Yep.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeffery Aryee. Thank you. I appreciate the time. And thank you so much, viewers, for staying tuned to today's episode. Please do check out Meteo Data and revise or start afresh. I mean, to learn something, but some programming and some Meteo stuff. If you haven't subscribed, please do and share with your friends. There's so much to learn from this conversation. Share with your friends and see you in our next episode. Bye.
Sure. Thank you too.
Thank you.